Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We get ready for the Chapter 4 study guide. I know we went over it yesterday, at least a few of the problems, but I am going to show you once again how you go about solving each one of these questions. Make sure you contact me if you need more help, and you can come in maybe on the morning on Friday before your classes if you need some more help before the test. Anyways, let's get to it. Number one, we need to graph this rule, and to do that we first have to fill out our table. So remember that our rule is a y equals -1, and that -1 is multiplied by whatever x is. So right here I'm just going to pretend I have this space where I'm going to put in all of my x's up here, and then I'm going to add 2. And so I just pretend like I take each one of these and I put it in right there in that spot, and that way I can add 2 after that and then just fill in the blanks there. So -3 to start times -1, so I take that -3, put it there, times -1, so a negative times a negative is a positive, so that would be the number 3, and 3 plus 2 gives me 5. Do the same thing next door, -2, multiply that by -1, and -2 times -1 is 2. I add 2, I get 4. -1 times -1 is 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. And we can keep doing that, and you'll notice that what it's happening is that it's going down by 1 each time. And part of that is because this slope right here, since the x is actually going up by 1 each time, this rule, this tells us the slope tells us that the growth is actually, which is weird because I say growth, but it's actually subtracting 1 each time. So between each of these, you're subtracting 1, and if you notice, that's the same number as our slope that's up above. So it's going 5, 4, 3, subtracting 1 each time. I just fill this out. 2 minus 1 is 1, 1 minus 1 is 0, 0 minus 1 is -1, -1 minus 1 is -2. So then I have my table all filled out. So the next part is I have to take that table and I put it on my graph. Now some of you might say, well, I can take my equation, put my starting point at 2, and I will go down 2 over 1 each time, and that's one way you can make your line. But I'll go ahead and graph our points here. I do want to label my graph a little bit, so make sure when you are doing your graph that you are labeling it, at least a few of these, so I can tell that if you're going up by 1 or going up by 2. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then my highest y value is 5, so I'll go up to 5. 0 to start, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and number those up to 5 because that's my highest. Maybe we'll go a little bit past that. So now that I know some of my y's, I do have some of my x's. My first x over here is a -3. So I'm going to go over to -3, and this +5 tells me I'm going up. So I'm going to go up 3, or over 3, 1, 2, 3, up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put my first point, and I keep putting all of my points in on my graph. So -2 is right here, up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I keep putting my points on my graph, and you'll see that it kind of starts doing this diagonal thing all the way down. And what you want to do in the end is take a straight edge and you just connect all your points. So I'll kind of freehand this here. It's always better with a straight edge, but I'll put my arrows on the end because this goes on forever. And I have my graph done. So you now have all your table filled out, and you have your graph filled out, and so our question is complete. Number 2, I did tell you to skip that one because we're not going to have one like that on our test. We'll go over diamond problems another time. For this next question, I picked out some information. We kind of did this in class too, but I know that he's trying to figure out, and he figured out that 100, according to him, has 203 coffee cups. So that's actually an important piece of information. That's what he thinks is happening. And our question is, was he correct? So I'm going to have to answer that pretty soon. In this question, I need to include a table, a graph, and a rule. So I need all three of those somewhere in my work. If you feel like this is not enough space to show all of your work, then you'll want to go ahead and attach a piece of paper to show that so that everything is complete. So I'm going to put a table. So I'll write table. I'll put that there in a second. I need my rule or my equation. So we should call it equation first and rule in parentheses, since we've been talking about this equation. And this is the equation we're talking about once again. We've got our y, which is our output. This is our slope. X is our input, which is our figure number. And b is our starting value. So figure 0, how many cups are in figure 0? That's what we will try to figure out in our table. So I will go ahead and go to my table, X, and I'll have a Y. I'm gonna make the table at least, I'll leave a spot for 0 there because I do want my starting point. I have my 1 and my 2 and my 3. And he, once again, he's jumping all the way up to figure 100, and he says figure 100 has 203 coffee cups. And so we're trying to figure out if he's right or not. But first, let's go back and fill in what we do know for 1, 2, and 3 here. We do know that 1 has 3 coffee cups, and 2 has 5 coffee cups, and 3 has 7 coffee cups. And so when you're looking at this, you always want to, once again, I've told you before, pick any 2 of these. So I can pick, 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. It doesn't really matter. I'll pick 2 to 3 right here. So from 2 to 3, I'm going up by 1 on my X. And if you pick this one, you have to pick the one underneath it. So 5 and 7. 5 to 7, I am adding 2 each time. So every time on my Y, when X is going up by 1, I'm adding 2 on my Y. So this is going to help us find our slope here in a bit when I'm looking at my M part of my equation. But if we know if it's going up by 2, I do the opposite if I'm going this way to get 0. So 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 2 is 7. If I go backwards, it's 3 minus 2, or 3 subtract 2 gives me my starting value, which in this case would be 1. So we know our starting value. That's actually really important. This means at figure 0, it's going to have 1 coffee cup. So coming over here to my starting value for B, I know that my starting value is a 1. To get my slope, once again, that's our rate of change. That's how it's growing each time on my Y as X is going up by 1. The other way you can look at it is you just take this number here, the change in Y, divided by the change in X. So change in Y is plus 2. So I put 2 on top and I divide by 1. So 2 divided by 1 gives me 2. That's my slope. And then I just drop down that X next to it. So this right here is our rule. So X represents our figure number, and Y represents our number of cups. So X kind of means like for every figure number, how many cups is it growing each time? It's growing by 2, and then my starting one, which was 0, when X was 0, if you think about it, 0 times 2 is 0, and 0 plus 1 gives me 1. So that's where that kind of comes from. These two are going to be matching, which you got here. So once I have all this, I'll graph my all my stuff. So it's kind of hard to see my graph here, so I'll just kind of estimate. On your test and your study guide, you probably see it a little bit more clearly. But 0, 1 is about right here, and 1, 3, let's see, would be about right. 1, 2, 3 is about right here. 2, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is about right here, and we have a line that kind of travels this way like this. So we've got our table, we've got our rule, we've got our graph, which are the 3 things that I needed, right? These 3. The last bit is, was he correct? So I have to put somewhere down here if he was correct or not. So I'll just kind of put it in this box. So he said that 100, if he puts it in here for that x, which means I have y equals 2 times 100, and then I add 1. So he said the 100th figure has 203. So I just do the math here. 2 times 100 gives me 200. And if I take the 200 and I add 1, what does that give us? That gives us 201. And that's not what he said it was. He said it was 203. So we have to answer that question. He was wrong because the 100th figure should have 201 coffee cups, not 203. Which is a little confusing because I crossed up to 201. That's actually the right answer. It's the 203 that's incorrect. So I was just saying that because it doesn't match what he said. So he's wrong. So once again, I've got all my different representations that we've learned about, and I answered the question for that one. All right, we're going to start on this one. We might have to go into part 2 here, but we'll kind of see if we can get started. So for this question, we've got to come up with a rule on this first question. So letter A. So the first thing we're going to do, what I would like you to do, is make sure that you are continuing this table. So if we continue the table to have 2, 1, and 0, we'll be able to get down to our starting value so we can make our rule. So when I look closely at this, this is growing by 12 at the bottom and 1 at the top, and it's doing that each time. So if I work backwards, 38 minus that 12 is 26. 26 minus that 12 is 14, and 14 minus or subtract that 12 is 2. So I've got my starting value, and with this 12 divided by 1, so my rise, which is my change in y over my change in x, that's going to be 12. So my rule I can write is y equals, it's growing by 12, x, and we start at 2. So that is our rule. And then we'll go ahead and go into part 2 on the second page. So get ready for that. Pause on this video if you need to see anything else.